Joe, let's start with you because you have cited this issue about inflationary pressures. Which specific inflationary pressures are you seeing impact these small businesses more than others?
Well, and first of all, thank you for having us on this afternoon to share the data. I think as we look across the crosstabs of the data across industries, you know, we're not seeing a whole lot of fluctuation. I would note that if you look at construction, manufacturing, retail, hospitality, restaurants, that is where we see the highest probably level of inflation. But as our data shows, dating back to June, over the last 3 months, 81% of small businesses say inflationary pressures have intensified for them. And, in terms of the impact to their financials, 3/4 say it's impacted their financial health. So we're seeing it sort of across the board, and that's very consistent with our data from June as well. I would just say the only difference from June is that the data is intensified. So we're now seeing it, all the numbers are sort of anywhere from the mid 80s to the high 90s across most industries.
Jessica, let's bring you in here because it's always interesting to see what the data tells us versus what you were actually hearing from some of these business people. Do their comments echo what we see in the data as well?
Yes, Taylor. What I'm hearing from my peers who are fellow small business owners is that inflation is really causing a problem from the cost of goods when we look at businesses in the hospitality or food services industry, as well as simple products and equipment that people need. It doesn't have to be, it's industry agnostic, but we feel the pressure from all sides to keep up with inflation. And we don't have the opportunity to pass the cost increases along to our clients in many industries. So it's really been a challenge coming out.
It's interesting, speaking of challenges, Jessica, that on the flip side of that, we've been having a lot of conversations about stagflation, where you have that inflation remaining really high, but you're starting to see economic growth slow down a little bit, in part, of course, this time around due to the Delta variant. How much of an impact from a headwind is economic pressures relative to perhaps maybe just some of the inflationary pressures?
Well, from what we've seen, the economic pressure seems to be the tightest constraint because ultimately access to capital continues to be a challenge. We're very excited about the changes that the SBA has announced to the EIDL program, which will enable many firms like mine to get better access to capital that we need to grow. But even when we talk about the economics of it, the cost of labor, many firms are competing with Amazon to get talent, and we're losing out in that battle. And I'm sure that you've heard about some of the workforce challenges, the hiring challenges. So the economic pressures are really really having an impact from what I'm hearing here in the Bronx, in our business, and as well with the other 10,000 small businesses alum.
It's so interesting that you mentioned Amazon because it's just one of many major large employers that have announced massive hiring plans. There's been a narrative coming out of COVID that the big businesses have benefited as small businesses have been challenged in many ways. Can you describe what that tension is? Do you think that the playing field is uneven, and why?
It is an uneven playing field. I mean, at the end of the day, if someone could go work for a large employer, the perception is that that company will provide better benefits, it will provide a better experience, and you can get many of those same experiences, those benefits in a small business. I mean, overwhelmingly, small businesses employ the majority of Americans. But when it comes to hiring, the perceptions are not as positive when it comes to small businesses. So people will surpass businesses like mine to go work for a big firm because they're under the impression that bigger is better. So we often, as small business owners, miss out on the opportunity to get great talent. Or in some instances, we serve as a pipeline for talent for the larger companies. We give people who may not otherwise have had a chance to work to come into our firms, they get the experience, and then the big companies hire them away because they're often able to pay higher wages. And so we're at a very interesting intersection as small businesses who are trying to create the jobs that are going to help lead the nation into recovery.
Joe, Jessica had mentioned the access to capital as an issue. In your survey, you find that only 31% of small business owners feel confident that they do have access to capital. So what role does the banking system play here, and where are the shortcomings?
Well, I think that the shortcomings, largely reside in the fact that, when a small business today would go apply for a loan with a financial institution or a fintech company, part of obviously the underwriting process would be looking at their 2020 financial statements, which for most businesses are not painting a rosy picture of their business. And so obviously the rear view mirror for small businesses, at least most of them through the pandemic, is not a positive one. What's really positive about what the SBA did last week, and Jessica referenced this in terms of modifying some significant components of the COVID EIDL program, is that to apply for that program, they're going to simply look at your 2019 statements. They're also increasing the loan limit from 500,000 to 2 million. They're also really, giving the small businesses a tremendous amount of more flexibility to drive working capital into the system, and also helping them consolidate their debt, because many of them are still, suffering from, the financial implications of COVID. I would note in particular, we see that Black small businesses are really having a more difficult time when it comes to not only capital, but also recovering financially from the pandemic. We found, when it comes to access to capital, you referenced 31%, but for Black small business owners, only 20% of them are very confident that they would be able to access capital if they need it. And I would also note 54% of them say that they will need to take out a loan or line of credit for their business this fall or winter, compared with the overall population, which is just 29%. So it's a 25-point jump for Black small business owners.
Joe, while we have you, it's been a big day over at Goldman Sachs. Huge change over at the top with your CFO saying he's going to step down. There's been a lot of new changes lately. Does it feel like you're working for a new Goldman Sachs?
No, I mean, one of the great things about Goldman Sachs is we obviously have a tremendous amount of continuity at the firm. And many folks, most of my peers I would note, have been at the firm for years and years. I've been at the firm for 12 years. So, part of the evolution of life is obviously people retire, they move on, but we obviously have a deep talent pool, and you're seeing that today.